Welcome, everyone, to another episode of SaaS Stories. I am joined by Gearl Loden, previously a guest on the podcast, and joins us today with his new book, Before It Breaks, which is all about trust, the 7 pillars of trust every leader must build, and such a timely book as well. Welcome, Gearl.
I am so excited to be with you again this year, Jonah. I'm really excited about being with you today just to talk about the book and trust, but also just to be able to connect with your viewers, people that are, who are tuning in just to share about leadership too.
Absolutely. And so, in your experience coaching leaders across education and, of course, SaaS, which is what this podcast is all about, how often do leaders realize trust is broken after the fact? And what are the early warning signs they should be watching for?
Oh goodness, that is something I think we all, not just in, I'm an educator by trade. I'm coaching a SaaS founder right now and other people in other fields. And trust is something that we have in common in all organizations. And when everything is high, as far as high levels of trust, things flow. You're able to make decisions. You can feel the synergy. I think we've all probably worked at some time in an organization where trust was low, or maybe you didn't trust the leader, didn't trust your team. And, there's signs around you. But one thing I've learned in coaching people is often people perceive trust being broken as something big, like there's a big event. And often, like if some employees have a flare up, get into it, the leader wants to deal with it right there, but they don't realize that the problem is not the problem. What typically happens is something that's been building over time. So you have to go back and look what has been happening. And often it's going to be people start out with good intentions and then they feel threatened, or maybe they feel like someone's not giving them the right amount of information, or just simply some things happen and you have tension. And instead of addressing it, you let it build. So I think most people could say, if you look around, do you feel like you have good communication? When you have communication, do you have clarity? Are people having the difficult conversations that they need to address the issues? I've been in organizations before where the managers are potentially have very competent employees, but they're not team players. You can't trust them. And instead of dealing with them and trying to coach them around being a team player, being someone that shares, they don't have the courage to because they're afraid this person has the skills. Well, if I try to deal with them, they may quit, they may leave, then I've got to avoid on the team. But in essence, that really hurts the rest of the team. Prima donnas get in the way of all kinds of things. They can show up late, they can miss deadlines, but because they have a skill set, they're able to do things. And others are looking at them like, why are you treating this person a certain way?
Mm.
And even though I'm an educator, I see that more with business people where it's like they feel held hostage because there's certain skills you need, and people are so hard to find. Once you have someone, they're often afraid to coach them.
Yeah. And on the topic of skills, you've written about the 7 pillars. I think you may have just mentioned one or two, but walk us through the high level of what these 7 pillars are.
Oh, and I'm going to say this: there's a lot of research around trust, so you'll see some of the common trends. The biggest difference in my book is trying to operationalize trust as something that you just don't take for granted, know it's high or low, but you actually are able to put a system around. But the foundation of everything that I talk about says that you've got to have character. And when I'm talking about character, you want a team where everyone doesn't have to be like you, but you want to know people have a value system that's consistent. You understand their system. You know that they have ethics and values. And they may not be perfectly aligned because of their religious beliefs or ethnic background or whatever, but at least you can figure out what they stand for and they're consistent with it. And that leads into the second pillar of just being consistent. Uh, when I talk to people or talk to groups and I ask, have you ever had a boss or someone around you that you didn't know what day of the week it was? You have to check in before you wanted to have a meeting with them or conversation. They all laugh and head nod. Okay, do I need to talk to them today or do I need to talk to them today? No, they're in a bad mood. Wait till tomorrow. And, oh, that happens. That happens so much. And, when you have people that are consistent and you know how to read them, I don't have to agree with everything they do, but if I just know I can predict what they're going to say, what they're going to do, and understand what they like, then I can adjust because, I want to support the leaders that I have. With me, I have 7 bosses in the board, and I have to figure out what they like and don't like and make sure they have the right amount of communication, not too much or not enough. And one thing on the operational side that I put in that's a little different about consistency, because most things about trust. They're going to talk about consistency, like I just said, but also it would be putting systems in place that are consistent. So you have quality inputs and outputs between your teams. You have sharing. You don't have one team like a SaaS team. One group's doing this, one group's doing that. The marketing people are sharing with the software development people, the people running the betas. You make sure that you have consistency so all the people have what they need when they need it. You want to know that you're consistent enough that just any person in that on that team could basically make them things flow and operate. That you don't have to be a hero with a special skill set to just make the day-to-day things run. Communication. And something I did with the book is I separated communication from clarity. Communication is so important because you've got to have a variety of ways of communicating. You got to make sure you listen to your people and understand how they like to be communicated with. But then a pillar later on that I'll share now is clarity because you've got to be clear. Just saying you communicated does not mean people understand. And if you
Mm.
don't have clarity, then you'll have rumors flying faster than the truth. And if you're silent, or don't communicate properly, the rumors are going to tell the story and you won't have an opportunity to tell the story in a timely manner. And then just being competent. And that goes back into, you've got to know your stuff. Your employees have to know their stuff. They have to be good at what they do. And as a leader, like when you're developing people, part of the trust factor is you may not have the perfect employees, like you're not the perfect leader, but you have a growth mindset. You're learning. You understand where you're weak and you shore up your weaknesses by having people around you that are strong. And when you move someone into a new role, you understand you've got to develop them. You got to spend time with them. Because I have seen this so many times where you've got a great salesperson. They're your best salesperson. You promote them to the head of sales and they fail. And then they end up resigning and going and doing something else. Or you take a nurse that's your best nurse, you put them as a charge nurse, but you don't train them, you don't lift them up. And then they end up getting frustrated and quitting. Or worse than that, you may have to remove them because they're not good at leading. So the competence factor is so important. And that goes back to your systems too. Just having systems in place people can trust and can predict. And then care is very, very important. And I know care is a soft skill that people talk a lot about, but being in an environment where you feel like you're more than just a number, that your leadership cares about you. And one way that I tweak care that's a little differently is like in my organization, people will hear me just say, we want to have a brisk business-like environment where we know our goals, we know our jobs, we do them well, but also the care in the system where we set it up where like, Joni, you're going to be productive. You're going to have what you need, but also you're going to have enough time to breathe and catch your breath and be able to think about, am I making a difference? Am I working with my team? Am I supporting my team? Am I checking in on them? And I'm also, do I have enough time to cast the vision for the future? Because if your head's always down in the world, it's as fast as we're moving now, you're not going to be able to stay up because you got to have time to think and be creative too. And if you're in that kind of environment where you like the team, you like your boss, you feel like you're supported, you've got time to really decompress, or maybe at times there's in the care is knowing that people like different things. So you can give them enrichment opportunities if they want to try new things. Like if someone wants to be a leader, you can give them little roles along the way to stretch them before they're a leader. And then the clarity part I've already mentioned. And then the last thing is probably the foundation. You have the character at the beginning and at the end, the courage, because it takes courage to have difficult conversations. And often people will, probably the biggest thing I see with courage is people will think it'll work out, take care of itself. And then it doesn't. And being able just to say, I want to sit down and talk with you. And I have several tools in the book that I think people will enjoy. I've marketed the book as not a motivational book, but it's really a OS for trust, so you can actually manage trust and not just let it go. Because if you're in an environment, like if I move into a new system and there's high levels of trust, if I don't manage it, it can erode. Or if I'm in an environment where I'm a turnaround agent and there's no trust, and I've got to start somewhere working on the pillars to build trust. So I think there's some opportunities there for people.
Yeah.
But courage is a big one.
I love that they all start with a C and they're very easy to remember. So I'm going to say them once again. Character, consistency, communication, competence, care, clarity, and courage. Um, the competence one stuck out at me when you were saying, people get put into roles, but they don't get the training and education for it. It made me think of AI and the way a lot of organizations are currently rolling it out. They're saying everyone should be using it, everyone needs to learn it. but there's no education program, there's no training, there's no systems, there's no processes. It's just like go out and learn it. Are you finding this quite common as well at the moment?
Something I have been predicting because we have actually paid SaaS professionals to come in that work with designing systems for organizations to come in and train our team. We started 2 years ago in just effective prompting. Then our leaders on our team and instructional leaders have been trained on good prompting. Now we've been working on connectors for a while and developing our own projects. But something I believe is the person, and now there's a new title. I cannot remember the title for you, but the money, in my opinion, is not going to be OpenAI or Claude, but it's going to be the person that can actually take the average person and tie it all together so you can use it. And that's like the hottest new job on the market because these people can take small companies, they can have a full-time job, or they can work in multiple small companies and make a very, very good living. Just being able to connect the dots and have systems in place that we can use. So I think that's going to be big. AI is coming and it's here. It's not going away. I know I use so many credits with Claude Cowork every week. It's unreal. And it's amazing what it will do.
It's incredible for sure. I do think
Oh,
though, a lot of employees are kind of being left to their own devices in terms of when and how to learn everything. And so coming back to the seven pillars, do you find specifically for SaaS founders, say scaling from, to 50 people, which one of the pillars tends to get neglected first? Which is the one that tends to be the most out of sorts?
the SaaS people that I'm working with, of course, the model there is most people they're trying to develop a good software that they can scale. And the ones that are addicted to being that startup entrepreneur, they want to sell, make a good profit, and they want to go back and do it again. And it's almost like you see this transition in the culture where you have these innovators that are so creative. And then as you scale, you need the MBA in, you got to have the CFO, you got to have the protocol. So then that really challenges them because you're having to put in an HR manual or having to do the things that maybe they don't like. And that's where bringing the culture up to speed and designing your culture, like a person I'm working with now. We've worked on an onboarding guide, and he's in his on his second company that he started up or helped start up, and they're trying to scale, buy another company, bring people in. And the big thing I keep working with them on is just the culture. You have this great culture, but are you developing the people as they come in so they're acclimated into your system? And also as he scales his ability, making sure he's able to leave things alone that he had to do when he was a startup because now he can be more of a CEO type person, COO person. And I don't care how much money you make, how fast you grow, your culture is what sustains your organization. And the culture that you have, you can't take it for granted. That's why you have like the trust indicators, they're all about culture. You know, there's research more minutes, culture eats strategy every day. And you can have slogans and you can have a company to come in and pay them big bucks to have a banner and this is what you're about. But then is that really what you're about? And you'll see with teams like talking about the competence and the consistency, you want to have that between your teams because if you're not careful when you have multiple departments, each one has their own little mini culture. And even though you want them to be free to have their own creativity, you want to know at the end of the day, they all support the organization's culture too.
Yeah. Yeah. No,
And SaaS
I
people, you deal with SaaS people all day long, and I love working with SaaS because they're so creative. But that culture piece is so important.
Mm, I agree. I think culture it goes a long way. And it's a very hard one to define. Like if you ask anyone, what is the culture like at your organization? They can't answer that question. And I've been thinking on that as well. What makes a good culture? And the word trust does come to mind. So, I think diversity is important in a culture. I think the culture is defined by the employees, not the leader as well. Trust is a big one, but what else would you say to that question? Is it answerable?
When you look at a system, when you're at equilibrium and everything's aligned, in especially a creative environment like I'm in the education field or SaaS field, that's where you can get so busy. The next thing you know, it's like midnight and you're like full of energy and you're fulfilled. But then if you're not in that zone, just like you can have a Saturday where you're doing nothing but scrolling, you're in that lower brain. At the end of the day, you're like, I am tired and haven't done anything today. A healthy culture, people are willing to go the extra mile. It doesn't matter if you have unions or not. If you need to stay over a few minutes and finish something, you don't mind it because if you need to leave a little earlier, boss is going to be flexible with you. And two, I advocate there's some people that love money, but in most situations in your area, you're going to have some similar pay. Some people may pay more, but if I love my supervisor and I love my team and we have synergy, when someone new comes on, we look at that as an opportunity to learn and we're going to embrace them. I mean, most people are around people like that more than they are their spouse. If you think about it, you get a shower, you go to bed, and you're busy, you have quality time with your friends at work at times more than you do your own kids. So you want to be in that environment. And when you're in that kind of environment, it would really take a lot of money to make you leave.
Yeah, absolutely. I think balance is important. Coming back to CEOs, which you mentioned earlier, I did some research before the podcast on trust, and the Edelman Trust Barometer specifically came up. So it found that 75% of people think CEOs should be bridging trust gaps, but only 44% actually do it well. Does that surprise you? And what do you think's driving that?
I think at times, some of the things you'll see is like with a leader, at times they don't have the flow in communication like they need. And people that are just on the floor of wherever, they're all very valuable, but they may think, well, they already know that. So you've got blind spots. At times, the ego, you've accomplished, you get so focused on numbers, you're making the numbers and you just assume the culture's good. And or you may have people around you that are telling you the culture's good, but it's not. And that's one thing about the diversity aspects with character and all. We don't have as many organizations now, but years ago it seemed like people would hire people just like them. It'd be like the country club or the good old boys club. Now you're seeing people value diversity more. Like when we're hiring, you don't have to be the same faith or of faith or same background as me. I want people to have different views, and we are going to focus on what's in common. We're not going to fight about what's different, but if I have people that see from a different lens, that helps me. So sometimes the ego gets in the way. The research that's out there says like just literally like 85, 90% of the people are going to say they're self-aware, but in reality, only about 5% are self-aware. And that's the biggest gift you can have as a leader is knowing your weaknesses, knowing your strengths. And when I coach people, I'll ask them this at times. Have you ever had a leader that has just said, absolutely, that did not work. I made a mistake. And here's what I'm going to do in the future. Most people are like, oh, well, I coach my people. Look, find times when you make mistakes and be vulnerable. Say, look, I made the decision. I owned the decision. We thought it worked. Here's what we did. It did not work. And here's what we're going to do in the future. That can actually give you more credibility and trust because people realize the leader made a mistake and he admitted it. And also that empowers others to not be afraid to make mistakes because you want people to try. I mean, very few people make a critical mistake. If you're stealing or something like that, that's more than a mistake. But you want people not afraid to try and to be creative and to also not hold back and tell you how they feel or what they see. And you have a lot of employees and some are going to hit you with things you don't like. It's okay. Just digest it and look for patterns and trends. And that's where the truth usually is.
Mhm. Yeah, it's an interesting one because I think the higher up the ladder you go, especially as a CEO, you probably speak to less and less people at the bottom. You're probably just speaking to like the leaders just below you. And so I don't know if you're getting the full picture. And they're probably giving you information that's not 100% accurate. So what do you think that CEOs can do in that instance? Like, I agree. I think admitting mistakes and being relatable is very important. Do you also find that it's important to stay close to all the departments in a business?
I have 1,300 employees. There are a lot of people a lot larger than me in my organization, but the biggest resource I have is my cabinet. I have about 9 people that I rely on, that I coach. I try to make sure they understand the philosophy. We have the quality circles, which, different organizations have different things, but we basically run a mini version of a sprint. Whoever has the influence or the authority or the expertise is the one that has total command of the project. I'm there to support them. We try to do a lot of after action reviews. We actually divide in divide and conquer in our organization and make sure that every 2 to 3 weeks we've got a couple people that meet with the different teams and just check in how they do and what's working, what's not. Takes a lot of dedication. And I'll be the first to say, when you're the leader, there's always going to be someone saying, "Well, I haven't seen you in a while," and I'm always saying, "I need to do better." But when I compare myself to other organizations, I feel like we're doing well. So the more you can be there, the more you can have feedback loops. You can have your leadership team, or you have just a quality circle where you bring people in from all the different departments and meet with them and just get updates from them and be there with them so you can get fillers out. The more visible you are. I'm not a big fan of the surveys because there's some research on surveys that shows that the people that are happy are just doing a good job. They don't worry. It's usually on the extremes and they embellish a lot. But we do surveys too, try to look at patterns. But the communication is so important. And I would say for leaders, just finding a way, asking your employees how they like to be communicated with, because
Mm.
there's so many tools today. And I think at times what happens is we're sending so many messages out that people just, well, it's the same, they just don't look at it. They get hit with so much. So finding out how they want to be communicated with and communicate with them.
Yeah. Communication's crucial. There's another story in the book that really stood out for me in chapter 6 actually. It was one I could relate to because this was me 20 years ago. You tell a story of the CEO who worked 70 hours per week, but he had no idea what his team was doing. And is this a common story that you see throughout when you're working with organizations? And is
Yes.
trust the issue here? Is trust in the team the issue?
And I'll share this. My wife picked at me because the stories in the book are real, and I've changed them all up because of some of the people I've coached, and some of them where I'm coaching someone it's really me, and my wife's like, "That was you. You did that." Uh, there's times where you don't have the trust, and you have this perfectionist type, and they're a hero. They put all the hours in. They want to change everything. They instead of just empowering their employees, it's almost like they're a mini micromanager and but they've got to stamp everything. And, I've worked with people like that. I've been around people like that and I've had friends that work for people. And when you talk about the patterns, it's like they're really competent, but they're afraid to let go. They've got to sign everything, check everything, and they don't realize that's slowing things down and it's them slowing things down. And also it stifles creativity. And your folks that are creative, that like to innovate and have a little autonomy, they're not going to stay within that environment. And you, as a CEO, you want to have like with me. There's a lot of decisions where I'll give a few parameters. Here's what I envision, but I want you to take it and make it your own. There's sometimes where, like during COVID, I'd had to make a decision, say, I need your support. There's times where I'll just throw out, here's a problem. I want you guys to let me know what it is, and they'll run it to me, and usually I'm going to support it and ask good questions and make sure. The thing I love is I can ask the questions and I'll know there's no way I would do this, but they know what they're doing and they also know what to look for if it's working or not and how to adjust. So I'll run with it and that helps me to continue learning because there's so many different ways to do the same thing. And there's times where you just give the decision totally away.
Mm.
But I think we've all probably worked for a leader. And I think at times, well, I'm not going to say all the time. I think early on it's easy for a new leader, and I was this way. You're new, you're thrown in, you don't have a mentor like when I first came out. You didn't have the coaching like you do today. Well, everything's important. You're so afraid you're going to miss something. You feel like you've got to have all the answers. And as I matured, I don't have to have the answers. I've got a great team. I know where to go for the answers. And then you learn to filter what that 20% is that really gives you the 80% reward.
Mm. It's yeah, perfectionism. It's an interesting one. I think a lot of them are perfectionists, and that's kind of why they've come such a long way as well. But what would be the first step in letting go of that level of control and micromanagement and starting to trust your team a little bit more?
This is going to connect slightly with it, but one thing I've had to coach leaders around is this: the ones that when someone wants me to come in and someone's being promoted, is it's often easy to when you're just in your comfort zone's being moved, your boundaries are being moved, and you're in a new role, but you're supervising someone that was in that same level you're at. You know that role. You were moved because you were really good at that role, but I did not promote you for the skill set that you had then. I'm seeing the potential in you to be in a different role. But often when they get in there, they're nervous. They start micromanaging the role they had before because they understand it. So one
Yeah.
of the early ways to do that is to teach someone when they're new. Look, let the new person be creative. Let them make this their own role. You hold them accountable to the KPIs or smart scorecard. Uh, Being able to have an accountability partner, because there's some things, I'm a coach. I'm not trying to sell coaching, promote coaching from that standpoint, but there's some things you can't read a book on that you'll just sabotage yourself or sabotage someone because you'll be micromanaging and not even realizing it. And people are not going to tell you, but you'll see it in your retention rate. You'll see it in your
Mm.
creativity. So just like having a coach, having a mentor. So when you promote people, especially that are new, having good seasoned veterans, mentors that can mentor them and make sure they're just checking in with them to help to kind of put some guardrails around.
Do you think it's important to let people make their own mistakes as well and sort of stop trying to, you know, plan for that and prevent it? It's the best
Oh
way
yeah.
they'll learn, right? It's kind of like children, raising children.
Oh, and that's the thing now, like in the coaching round, everyone can say they're a coach. And there are a lot of people that go through a little training. And then when you talk to them, they're really a mentor. They're wanting to come in and say, now, Joanna, here's what you should do. That's not the way you do it. In a real coach, and you're asking questions and helping them to get clarity. Now, just like if you're running a suicide hotline or a counselor, if someone really starts threatening self-harm, you may say time out. But if I'm with you and I'm working with you and I see that you just absolutely don't have a clue and you're about to make a mistake, I'll say, time out. Can I mentor you for a minute or can I consult with you for a minute? And then I'll say, here's three things I've seen people do in this role. Do you think one of these might work? But there's lots of times where you're kind of like, okay, I want you to try this. And you kind of help them to lay out their plan, then you let them try it and they'll learn from it.
Mm.
Experience is a great teacher.
Yeah. And it's what builds character, right?
Oh, yes. And when you squeeze someone, when times are good, everyone's great. But when times are bad and you're going through a recession, you got a new company you've just started, and all of a sudden things are changing. The ones that survive the challenging times are the ones that usually have great companies and great cultures and thrive. When it's
Mm.
easy, everyone wants in the game.
Yeah, for sure. You talk about character a lot in the book, and it's a tough one to define for me because I think a lot of people probably confuse character with personality. So, can you explain what you mean by building character, and what is the first step to doing that?
Well, the character is going to be just knowing someone has values, and like I can look at some politicians that have different views than me, but I respect them because I know they're going to be consistent. Well, character is not having the same values as me. And at times people want to hire people that think like them, go to the same church, they in the same clubs. That's where you end up having tunnel vision. But having someone that you know is a very ethical person that is going to do the right thing when it comes down to it, that they're true to the values of the organization and they are going to be consistent. Uh, I'll say this: there's times where people that I would not want to go out to eat with that are on my team, or maybe we just are not that close per se. I totally trust them in making decisions. I know they have great character. There's people that I love that I would just love to go and play golf with or hang out with that I'm not about to let them make a decision because I can't trust them with that decision. And that's knowing the strengths of your team. It's part of my job is I want to challenge people. And if you tell me I want to be a leader, well, I'm going to give you opportunities to step into roles and stretch you and coach you. But there's certain times where I know your skill set well enough, and that's me. I've got to know my team's strengths. And we spend a lot of time doing different things. We'll do the strengths finder, we'll do the disc, and we'll look and laugh at each other because we know we do it enough. We know each other's quirks and personalities, and we'll make fun of each other because we know, like I use the Disney model where we'll let the dreamers dream and we make sure everyone lets them dream without interrupting because anytime a dreamer dreams, there's going to be a million reasons to say that won't work. If, oh, yeah. And so we let them dream. And then after that, we'll let the ones that got to have everything dotted and crossed tear it apart. Is it? And then at the very end, well, let me say this, we'll try to make it reality. Like if we're wanting waterfalls and alligators and volcanoes, Then I'll let the ones come in and say, well, we can't have a waterfall or a volcano, but we can make an artificial waterfall. We can make an artificial dinosaur. And then the last group that want to dot and cross everything, is it legal? Can we get it approved? Can we fund it? Can it be sustainable? So at the end, all of the people have had input.
Hmm. Yeah, it's important to get input from the wider team as well. Um,
Oh, yeah.
I think in SaaS companies, the remote team continues to be quite prevalent. And I do wonder, is it harder to get team trust, culture, when a lot of the team is actually working remotely? I still run into organizations where they're 100% remote and have been for since COVID days. Um, what do you find in those organizations?
I will say my organization has shifted back to in person, but we do have the ability to flip the switch and go, like if someone's sick and they need to work from home. But a couple of people that I've worked with in my master classes that I have or a coach have shared some really innovative things that they do. A friend of mine runs international teams. He has three different countries that he has teams in. And you've got everything from one country, this is a normal work week. And all three countries have different work weeks, they have different holidays. And just being able to say, instead of saying like in most of the Christian countries, you're going to have Christmas, they just give you a pool of days and you take the ones off you like. He said what was funny was his people that are Christians now are working right around Christmas because there's not a lot of calls, so they like getting caught up. So they may have Christmas off, but that's about it. Another thing that I've seen people do is just creative things like we're going to have lunch today. And they all get their lunches and they have a lunch and they just sit there like you would in a workroom and they're talking and having fun while they're having lunch together. So I think if you look at it as far as things that people like to do or want to do, I think you can be creative. Uh, as a supervisor, e-cards for birthdays, holidays, just being able to do the shout outs and recognizing people the way they like to be recognized is good too. The one thing I'd caution of that, and I think the last time I talked, I mentioned the platinum rule, but as a leader, like I value knowing my team. Well, I want someone new. I want to treat them like the golden rule, which every faith has is I want to treat you the way I want to be treated. But then I want to get to know you and treat you the way you want to be treated. Like if you have children and you need to, if I just give you extra time off to go to ball games or have things, that means a lot to you. Someone else may want to raise more money more than anything, or someone may like being publicly recognized with a plaque, while another person does not want to be publicly recognized. Well, if I know that as a leader, then I can tailor my praise to them. And not just
Yeah.
praise, but the accolades.
Yeah. Yeah, the importance of really just recognizing the different characters in the organization and their strengths and their values and really just catering to that rather than treating everyone the same. Another really good one that I heard recently was allowing people to excuse themselves from meetings where they know they're not going to get or give any value as well, which I know a lot of us sit in those meetings going like, why the hell am I here?
Oh, that happens. Death by meetings. That is one thing that we have tried to do a good job of. And the one thing I've stressed the whole time is we try to have minimalist meetings and we tell people don't be offended, but if you're not in a meeting you need to be in, you need to talk to us because no one's got ill intentions. And there's times where we'll have a meeting and in the middle of it, we're like, oh gosh, we need to have Joanna in here. She's not here, or we need to have Tom in here. And then you'll be like, Tom, someone on the team will give Tom an update. Next time we need you in, here's what we did today because we needed them. But I think that's a tool that I use as a leader that I like because I don't like having people in and they're wasting their time. Now, my big meetings, like once a week, I have a big, like all hands, all in my cabinet, and we have time. We just do our big rocks. What are we working on? What do we need? How can we support each other? Helps me as a leader to know the rhythms because now I've been around everyone long enough. I know, okay, Karen likes this, and if I have a special project, she can do this at this time of the year, but this time of the year she can't because she's got all of her federal reports to you or whatever. But you kind of learn the rhythms too.
Mm, that sounds good. Um, we've talked about trust in the workplace amongst employees, amongst the CEOs. One thing we haven't touched on is trust with customers. And so specifically in the world of SaaS, having done some research, here's a stat that stopped me. It said that 4% less than 4% of dissatisfied SaaS customers will complain before they leave, which means most people, you don't know if they're upset. They will just go quietly. I know that's me in a restaurant. If I'll never complain about my food, I'll just
Oh,
leave quietly and never come back. Um, but that's fundamentally a trust problem, isn't it? And so what what can organizations do about this?
that is not just in the SaaS world. I think that's in multiple organizations now. And, I still take pride in if I have an issue, I'll call a place and say, I'm not the one that's going to post on Facebook or social media, but here's an issue we had. And I encourage people to do the same for me. And we have publicly did that in our organization, trying to get people to call us when there's issues or use our suggestion boxes. But the world of SaaS, I mean, we use so many SaaS products, and I think it's just like any other field. The best customer you have is the one that you have now, and you don't want to lose them. And it's so easy to get busy and just assume there's a great relationship, or maybe it's not the company, but I'm hooked on to the salesperson. I love them, and I'm addicted to the salesperson. And then when they leave, the new one doesn't connect with me for the way they did. Uh, Now, when you're buying, I would encourage this: when you're buying companies and you're merging, communicate with the people that are being bought, communicate with the people that are you're merging, because the clients, I mean, I may like a product. I don't know anything about this company's buying. And then when things starts changing, if you don't give me a heads up what's changing with a roadmap and communicate with me, I'm going to be very frustrated. I'm not a SaaS designer, but we spend hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars on SaaS tools. And that happens a lot where you have a company you love, they merge, things change, and then they don't, or they'll say things are going to blend, but they rush the blending instead of beta testing and making sure everything's synced up.
I think mergers, it's a common thing that happens. They don't always communicate. They'll buy out like a smaller company. They won't tell the employees what's happening. Everyone gets worried that they're going to lose their job. So they start leaving. Customers as well. They're like, well, they'll probably put up the prices. Everyone's making all these assumptions that's really eroding the trust. And so again, this comes back to the C of communication. A lack of communication can really start losing a lot of customers and also really good employees in an organization.
There's a lot in the book about that, because silence gives human nature. When anything is new, we're going to guard ourselves against pain over pleasure. And when someone says something's new, people are going to think, am I going to die? Is it going to kill me? How bad is it going to be? They think the worst things. And
Mm.
often, if you'll just give people a good rationale and communicate with them, and then get back and give them time to decompress, and then give them time to ask questions, that helps a lot. But when you're in a world of SaaS where you've got developers that are paid very, very well and they have all kinds of opportunities, if you're not communicating, the silence is going to give the people with a negative side an opportunity to tell the story, and then you're going to be behind the game. I've actually got
Yeah.
a story about a leader that's having to go through that in the book. And, it's very frustrating when you're in that environment and you have great intentions, but you can't get ahead of the story because you were quiet. And the rumor mill is so fast. And once people make up their minds, we see this in the world today. When someone makes up their mind, even if you present them with rational facts, they're going to double down even more often.
Mm. So true. So true. My last question, I've already asked you this one because you've been on this podcast before. So I'm going to redo it a little bit. So this is a tradition question that I like to end on. And it's basically, if you could go back in time, what advice would you give your younger self? You've already answered that. So I'm going to reword it slightly in this instance. And it's, if you could go back in time, which pillar of trust did you wish you understood earlier in your leadership journey?
Oh goodness. My background. I was a kid in school. I was ADHD, dyslexic, full speed ahead. I didn't even realize I was dyslexic until my oldest son was diagnosed with dyslexia. And I asked the doctor, I said, do you think I'm dyslexic? And he started laughing. He was like, I'm not dyslexic, ADHD. And he started laughing, and he was like, you're a poster child for an adult who's never been diagnosed. So my first 10 years in administration, I was like, wow. I mean, just busy, 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 that synergy, take action. And I did mature and I did learn to slow down and take care of myself better and to care more. It wasn't that I didn't care, but I really needed to find people that are like the ones that really like the party planning. They really better at things. So I make sure now I have really good people around me. I love my people. I care for my team, but I want to have people that that's their passion. That's what fills their buckets every day. I mean, I've always been competent. I've always known about communicating. Always been very consistent. You know who I am. You know I have character, and I have the courage to make decisions. But the one is probably one of my weaknesses is the clarity side. I'm communicating, but do people really understand? So that's helped me as a leader learn to put more feedback loops in to realize that people assume I know everything, even though I don't, and to put the feedback loops in and to really get the vibes of what's going on in the workplace floor. Like our big goal for this next year is we're going to focus on strategic pruning and going into our teams and getting on the ground floor and getting them started and get out and let them tell us what's working, what's not, where you had to duplicate processes, what processes are in place. Now, this is not as much SaaS oriented, but as some of your organizations have been around for a while, you'll have turnover and people keep buying the same things just because they've always bought them, or they'll keep doing things the same way, but they don't even need to do that anymore. People are not even using the tools, or they're doing something that's not aligned because it's just the way it's always been done. So we're going to try to go back and really give our employees a lot more time and just purging whatever we can.
Yeah, that's a really good initiative. I think that would be my weakness as well, the clarity part. I can't tell you the number of times I felt like I communicated something. What I got in return wasn't what I was expecting. And I just went, I wasn't clear enough. It's my fault. So clarity is a big one for me to work on as
I
well.
mean,
Maybe that would be my goal.
yeah, and I've learned, tell me, paraphrasing. Now tell me what actions you're going to take. What did you get from this? That helps. And then I'll piggyback off of what you just said. One tip that I'll give the leaders about repairing trust is don't say, I'm sorry. Don't say, I made a mistake without doing one thing. When I say I'm sorry if I've broken trust, I'm putting that really in limbo. But when I say, Joanna, I tried this, it did not work, and I know your team suffered. Here, I'm sorry for that. But here's what I'm going to do the next time. That way, I'm actually saying what I'm going to do. And when I repeat that, repeat that, repeat that, I'm building the trust up and I'm establishing more credibility because I've admitted that. So my employees will trust me more.
Yeah, I love that. That's a good line. Gerald, thank you so much for being on the show. For
I
anyone
really enjoy it.
interested, where can they get this book? Other than Amazon, of course.
Okay. I'm going to say this. You're in a special situation. You have an advanced copy officially on July the 7th. So we're a little over a month away. It'll be available. One thing I'm excited about is on my landing page, which should go live in a couple of weeks, well, in about a week. I've got a trust assessment that you can take. And when you register, you're not going to be blasted with a lot of emails, but it will keep you in the loop as far as what's happening. Once you buy your book in the back, there's a code that you can enter. It's your code. And there's a lot of supportive materials for it. And if you love workbooks, I have a very nice workbook that will be available when the book is. But I'm going to do this for because the people who are going to buy the book are going to people who know you've been reading your stuff. The first month from July the 7th to August the 7th, I'm going to give a PDF of the workbook for the people that purchased in that month. I think they're going to enjoy the workbook. And then one thing I'm really excited about along that lines is I've been having master classes, just free master classes and paid masterminds for a while. But I've got about 4 days already for when you buy the book and register, you can sign up for a master class. And we'll have a conversation like we did today, just kind of going over some of the pillars, asking people to bring some of the issues. So you have some group coaching going on for about 90 minutes as a way to serve people.
Yeah. Love that. We're going to have all of that in the show notes for everyone to be able to access. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And I've enjoyed it. I hope you guys have a great winter, not summer, but winter.